Today I'm going to take you through what I feel are the 4 most important steps in creating the perfect tone for your needs. Let's get started. Before we get started, you'll notice that I have one instance of a dynamic ambience reverb on here, just so that things don't sound so bone dry when we're creating this. Gives it a little bit more of a natural sound. Step number 1 is going to be choosing the appropriate amp to get the end results of what we're trying to accomplish and reach our end goals. Now, obviously, if you are looking for a Fender style tone, you're not going to go to a Marshall style amp or vice versa. So really, this is going to come down to being a very personal choice and something you're going to have to decide on your own. But for today's video, I'm just going to scroll on down to what I feel is a really killer amp that we have in the Helix, and that is the Placator Dirty. I'm going to add that amp. Now, a lot of folks might get right into thinking, how do I tweak the amp settings? What do I do within those to get this sounding right? But after I've chosen my amp, I'm going to move immediately on to what I feel is probably the most important step. And this is step 2, choosing the appropriate cab for the end results we're looking for. So what we can do is head over to another block, go to our cab section. I'm just going to start off using a single cab. I've done videos before where we can use dual cabs and whatnot, but let's just keep it simple for this video. And I'm going to need to make an appropriate choice again. If I choose something like the 110 US Princess, that may not be suiting what I need or what I want from this amp. On the other hand, maybe we try a really bizarre combination and it works out perfect. But for this video, I'm going to head down to some of my favorites, the old greenbacks here. So what we can do is, just starting with these default settings on the amp, we can basically come down here and I'm going to choose, let's start with the Greenback 20. With whatever microphone it comes up on, and I could start just hitting a few chords to see what things are sounding like. And I can scroll through different cab. Now, obviously, these all have different mics on them, so that's going to have a very big effect on what the sound of the cab is. But a lot of times, even still, we can get an idea of the general feel of the amp and what it's going to give us. I'm going to settle back on one of my favorites, is the 412 Greenback 25. And that's the interesting thing, is once we do this enough, you're going to start to find what each cab kind of brings to the table and which ones are your favorites. And you're going to probably be able to go more instinctively right to the ones that you know will work for a given situation. Moving on now to step 3. So we have step 1, which is choosing the appropriate amp, going to be a very personal choice. Step 2, choosing the appropriate cab that's going to give us what we want. That's going to be a very important step. But step 3 is going to be pretty much equally as important as choosing the right cab, and that's going to be choosing the right mic and mic placement. Now, a lot of this will become instinctive again once you've done this enough. Anybody who follows my channel knows I'm a huge fan of ribbon mics. So oftentimes I'm going to come over and immediately go to maybe a 121 ribbon or a 160 ribbon, maybe a 4038, maybe an 84 ribbon. But let's start off with something like the 121 here and see what it does. You'll notice the default setting is cap, edge, and distance of 1 inch. There's always something I really like about that ribbon mic. Now, you'll hear that it is quite boomy, it is quite muddy, but that's okay because we're going to do a few things to kind of rectify that. Now, obviously, moving the position around is going to have a dramatic effect. You'll notice right there, as I move out to the edge, I lose that edge and that cut. I could actually move this closer to the center. And then to take care of some of that bottom end, move that distance back a few inches. You'll notice right away things have improved dramatically. So choosing the right cab in step 2, choosing the right microphone for our ideals, and the mic placement for what we're trying to accomplish is going to be an extremely important step, and that is step number 3. Now, what we can do is go back and kind of revisit step number 1. Some folks might feel that this is me adding another step in there, but now we can come in and start tweaking the tone stack of the amp. So we've got a good starting point. Now, you might think, I want a little more cut and sizzle to that. I'm going to bring my treble and presence up maybe a little bit. Bring a little more bass and mids up into that. I'm going to come in here and maybe turn the fat off. And that C45 off. Now that I've done that, I can come back to my cab and now I can start playing with things a little bit. Maybe I want that distance a little closer now. That's starting to come together nicely. I'm going to actually bring that even just a tad closer. And maybe we'll stick right there. So far, step number 1, we have our amp, the proper amp for the situation we need. Step 2, choosing the appropriate cab that's going to give us what we want. Step 3, choosing that proper microphone and positioning of the microphone on the cab, and then revisiting the amp to get the tone stack tweaked and dialed in to whatever degree we can to get a tone that's working for us. Now, step 4 is one of the most important elements that I use in my presets, and that is coming to a new block, heading to the EQ section. I'm just going to keep this stereo just so that if we do have a stereo preset and we want to retain it as a stereo preset, and just depending on the placement of this block, we might have something stereo before it. So I'll just keep it stereo for now, but that's going to be the low and high shelf. And I love setting both the low and high frequency to 650 hertz. The reasoning behind this is very simple. This gives us a very quick, intuitive way of tweaking on the fly and tweaking in a manner that's going to be very easy to predict what's going to happen. Moving a microphone around, back and forth and positioning can be a little bit tougher to dial things in if we don't know what we're doing with that. If you have a lot of experience, it might be a lot easier to do. But once we have a great basis to our tone, having this low and high shelf EQ can be invaluable. I have found these settings of low and high frequencies, both at 650 hertz, to be really, really great. You'll notice that the default settings I use are both at 650 hertz. The highs all boosted by 2 and the lows all dropped by 2 dB. That's just a starting point. It's really going to depend on what we're starting with in our preset, and sometimes even the guitar we're using and what our final end goal is going to be. But basically my thought process on this is that the 650 hertz setting is going to allow us to control any muddiness and tubbiness with the frequencies below 650, and it's going to allow us to control any of that sizzle highs and a little bit of nice fullness above 650 hertz. So if we have a preset that sounds too thin and buzzy, we might want to cut those high frequencies and boost some of the low frequencies. If we have a preset that's tubby or muddy sounding, we might want to cut all those frequencies on the low gain. So basically just taking this and starting with it zeroed off so it's not really doing anything. Here's what we started with. Now, if you decide that you want a little more cut and brightness to this, you can just come in here and roll this up a dB or 2. 1 or 2 dB can go a long way with this shelf EQ. Here's it with it off. It just adds that little extra bit of polish to make it more mix ready. Now, if we combine that with a slight cut in the lows, where kind of my starting default point was, little bit full and tubby, maybe muddy slightly. That makes it a little more mix ready, and we can even go as low as like maybe a dB cut and boost on the lows and highs. And it just polishes things up to sit in a mix a little better and gives us a way to be able to tweak on the fly. There are my 4 steps to the perfect Helix tone. I hope that you can mess around with that, and I hope that you find it as helpful as I do when creating my Helix tones. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please like the video and share it with anybody that you think would get some use or enjoyment out of watching it. Also, please subscribe to my channel. I'll be back with plenty more in the very near future. Thank you guys again so much for sharing your time with me. Ciao for now.